Okay, thanks everyone for your patience. Apologies, we had a bit of a technical glitch, and I see our attendees are slowly being let in. So a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, from wherever you're joining us from. My name is Pamela Chang, and I work with the Transport Sector Office at the Asian Development Bank, and I oversee the e-mobility support and investment platform. And so I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on implementing micromobility effectively, and this will be presented by my colleague, Tom Fleming. So this webinar is organized under the umbrella of the e-mobility support and investment platform for Asia and the Pacific, which aims to build capacities and support scaling up of financing for e-mobility initiatives. And the platform is operated by ADB and co-implemented by our partners UNEP and co-financed by the Global Environment Facility. And so if you'd like to join the e-mobility community under this platform to stay up to date on our activities, please fill in the assessment survey where you can leave us with your contact details in case you have not already done so. So the QR code to the survey is now available on the screen, and we'll also share a link to the survey to the chat as well. And so in this webinar series, we have an exciting lineup of discussions planned for you. On the screen, you can see the webinars coming up in Q1, and we will be sharing the program for Q2 as soon as it is finalized. So in our next webinar taking place in 2 weeks' time, would be Ms. Nur Zuriani Zaki, who will present a case study from Malaysia on policy measures undertaken to speed up EV adoption. And we will share the registration link to that webinar in the chat. So let me welcome Mr. Moshi Uzuman from our implementing partner from Integrated Transport Solutions, and he will be moderating today's session. So let me hand you over now to Moshi for him to guide us through the rest of the webinar session. Enjoy. Thanks.
Thank you, Pam. Good morning, good afternoon to all of you. Before introducing our today's speaker, just a couple of words on house rules. All microphones will be disabled, and at the end of today's session, there will be some time for question and answers. So please send us your questions through the Q&A function, the one you can see at the bottom of your screen. You can send questions throughout the presentation. We'll monitor them. In comparison to our webinar series last year, we have extended this slot from 30 minutes to 45 minutes to allow us time to discuss any key questions. And please note that this webinar session is recorded and it will be shared online. Now, let me introduce our speaker today. As Pam mentioned, Tom Fleming. He's an associate at Integrated Transport Planning. Tom has been extensively involved in the development of micromobility in the UK, and he is a co-author of the paper Making Bay-Based Micromobility Work. Those of you who have listened to into our webinar series earlier, you probably know Tom. He was moderating those series. Now, today is our chance to hear from him about this really interesting topic. Without further ado, let me hand over to Tom for his presentation. As I mentioned earlier, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of this screen. And please post any question that you may have, and we will discuss them at the end of the presentation. So Tom, floor is all yours.
Thank you, Moshi. And then thank you everybody for joining. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. A slightly different role for me, as you've alluded to. But I'll excited to talk to you all about micromobility and making micromobility work. I guess I'm going to provide a bit of a whistle-stop tour. There's a lot in here. I know we're running a little bit behind schedule as well, so I'll do my best. But the content of this presentation is displayed on the slide. Quite simply, we'll begin with an introduction to micromobility. So what is it? Also, what is it not? We'll look at some data from micromobility in Asia. And then I expect that the bulk of the presentation will focus on considerations for planning shared micromobility systems, so for hire systems, and then we'll conclude with some key takeaways at the end. I want to emphasize that when I refer to e-scooters within this presentation, we're predominantly referring to the electric kick scooters, the type displayed on the image in this slide. So I know there are some differences in definitions across the world in relation to scooters. So just to avoid any confusion there. So let's begin with introducing micromobility. So what is micromobility? Well, micromobility is a very fluid and dynamic market segment, and it's an umbrella term for a diverse collection of predominantly personal modes, not exclusively, but predominantly. Micromobility is predominantly lightweight and small vehicles. They can be human powered, or they can be electric. They can be privately owned or shared, kind of for hire vehicles, and we're typically talking about speeds that are less than 25 kilometers an hour, and trips that are not usually shorter than maybe 4 kilometers in length. So in terms of examples of micromobility, here are some examples displayed on this slide. It's as I said, it's quite a diverse collection of modes, a mixture of the conventional and the very new. So, for example, the bicycle, which is a form of micromobility, was invented somewhere between 1818 and 1839, depending on who you believe, and what constitutes maybe a bicycle. The first electric bicycle in 1897. And then the first sort of bike share system in 1965. So cycles are the most sort of traditional, conventional form of micromobility. If we go around this slide, the top left, we've got a privately owned e-scooter. If we move one to the right, we've then got this is Harley Davidson's best attempt at an electric bicycle. That's quite interesting. We then have some rollerblades, so not necessarily electric mobility, but essentially micromobility. We then, at the top right, we have e-unicycles, which are becoming more popular, not always legalized, but increasingly you see them around sort of major cities. Beneath that, a skateboard, and that can be electric. You can have an electric skateboard, electric longboard. The bottom right, then we have an electric bike share system. Prominently in the middle, an e-scooter and a regular pedal cycle, and then on the far left corner, bottom left corner, we've got an e-cargo bike as well. So really diverse collection of modes that we're talking about here. Importantly, what is micromobility not? So we're not talking about motorcycles. We're not talking about mopeds. These vehicles typically go much faster, and they cover greater distance in terms of their trip profile as well. Although in some cases, in some areas, you may see mopeds defined as micromobility, but for the purposes of this presentation, we're not doing so today. In terms of the benefits of micromobility, micromobility can help deliver sort of benefits in many ways. I think one of the key items, of course, is emissions reduction, carbon reduction. Micromobility vehicles, including electric, are generally zero emission at point of use. They're also, of course, very space efficient modes, being smaller, being personal. And then there are health benefits, cost efficiencies as well, and they can help sort of reduce congestion in cities. And some modes have a greater or lesser ability to deliver those benefits than others. So, for example, cycles are very good at sort of delivering health benefits, so kind of core form of active travel. E-scooters are also active, but far less so than cycles. The chart on the right is quite interesting because it highlights how actually the variation in the modal profile. So at the top you can see we've got a few arrows against this graph. This graph shows average carbon emissions by transport type or transport mode. The bicycle, very low. The emissions are really in its manufacture and disposal. An electric bike is a little bit more polluting, predominantly because there's a motor battery in there that also has a manufacture and disposal profile. If you go further down, you can see the electric, what's called e-kick scooter in there. It's one below the electric car. So this graph is showing that electric car is less polluting than electric scooter. And actually, this is really to do with the dockless model. So if that was an e-bike, and it was a dockless e-bike, it would perform similarly on that chart. And the reason is you can see considerable sort of emissions there produced in terms of the manufacture, which is and disposal, and then also the maintenance. So dockless systems require often that they're quite intensive to maintain and move vehicles around a network. So it just shows you how sort of different profile of vehicle operational model can impact on the sort of carbon footprint as well. If we think specifically about electric micromobility, and of course this is the e-mobility platform, so electrification is what we're really interested in. Electrification has been shown to benefit both, the adoption of micromobility. It's probably changed the profile, public perceptions and attitudes of certain micromobility modes. I know that in Asia, in developing Asia, and particularly cycling can be seen as a mode of transport that's maybe for lower income groups. That's not necessarily the case in other parts of the world, and some of these new and emerging micromobility modes are really kind of creating a bit of prestige for the segment as a whole, and particularly actually electric bikes have been really popular in parts of Europe, and they're sort of taking over bike share systems from sort of pedal cycles. So micromobility can be electric. It can also be electrically assisted. So there's different forms of electrification. And some of the benefits of electrification are that greater distance can be traveled with less effort, which can make it more accessible. And then there's also potentially, because of that, a greater substitution value with private car trips, where it's because you can get further with less effort, for example. It's then more viable to switch up a trip in that way. So I mean, this is a huge growth area at the moment, and we'll show some data later on that kind of explains some of that. In terms of different deployment models of shared micromobility, predominantly, this slide just aims to explain how deployment can vary. So it can vary in terms of parking, where you can have a docked system, a free floating system, or a combination of the two, a kind of hybrid of the two. These systems can differ in terms of charging and propulsion. So whether we're looking at battery swapping, whether we're charging batteries within docks, or whether we're taking vehicles away to be charged elsewhere at the end of the day. There are different pricing models in terms of paying per distance, per unit time, fixed price, subscriptions, whether or not there's an unlocking fee, whether or not there's a kind of a free 10-minute, 15-minute pass at the start of a ride. They can differ in terms of financing as well. So quite often we'll see revenue sharing models where the public authority receives a share of revenue that's generated from the scheme. They can also be profit sharing, where the operator retains, covers their costs, but then the profit is shared on the same basis, or zero sum, where they're entirely commercial. And then different approaches to servicing and maintenance as well. So in terms of micromobility in Asia, I just wanted to share a few statistics. Now these focus on public bike sharing systems, because these are the systems that have been sort of most established, and for which there is most data comparable within Asia, but also globally. So the map, this map shows that the number of active systems essentially. So you can see sort of China, the United States and parts of Europe as well are sort of really dominating this chart. The next slide presents this data by continent. So here we can see that Asia has 44% of all public bike sharing schemes, slightly more than Europe, although those two continents are dominating. However, within that, there's some context. So 81% of bike share schemes are within China. You think, I think 4% within Japan, 4% within India. But China has really been the leader, and if you discount China, Asia actually performs relatively poorly in terms of bike share and micromobility relative to other parts of the world. So this slide then shows the growth of bike share per year. So here we can see that in Asia and in China, there was huge growth between sort of 2010 and 2017. And the latter part of that growth was really driven by dockless systems. So sort of free floating bike share systems. They then hit a bit of a plateau. And that relates to some of the challenges that were experienced in those systems at the time, and in part, and sort of oversupply in the bike share segment. So you can see relatively little growth in Asia since that time. If you compare that to other parts of the world, Europe has seen continued and sustained growth. North America has actually seen a reduction, but that's partly because of the popularity of e-scooters. And if e-scooter share was on the map, that would look very similar to Europe in terms of the growth profile. So it's a repositioning really of the shared micromobility mode that's being used, and South America may be quite similar actually to that as well. So I said that the bulk of this presentation would focus on considerations for sort of planning shared micromobility systems. So this slide here provides a bit of a framework for planning shared micromobility. It combines kind of physical stuff in terms of maybe infrastructure with social and environmental aspects as well. I think it's important to consider each of these, and they're not mutually exclusive. They do all relate to one another. But in the following slides, we'll go through each in turn. But this framework serves as a useful sort of reference, really for probably after this presentation, if you're looking and reviewing these materials again. So the first item was desired outcomes. So I think it's important to understand that micromobility should be a force for good, and it shouldn't be disruptive. But if it's not planned appropriately and integrated, then it can be disruptive, and it has been in some cities in some parts of the world. So micromobility needs a clear role in the transport system. So within that, we need to think about what objectives and targets we're setting for micromobility. What do we want it to achieve? Which modes should it complement, and which should it maybe compete with? And then by extension, what are the implications of this competition? So typically we want it to complement other forms of active travel, walking in particular, and public transport often as well. And we want it to kind of compete with private vehicles, because we a private car or maybe the motorbike, because we maybe want to see a shift away from those modes. But if you maybe don't regulate it, it can also compete with walking, and has been shown to, and it can also compete with public transport. So public transport is such a large revenue generator for many cities. If you're losing that revenue stream, and that's not being internalized within the big authority, that can impact kind of investment in transport more widely, including infrastructure that's required to support micromobility. So it's a complex picture, and it needs to be planned appropriately. And that's that bottom bullet point. It says planning regulation are needed really to achieve desired outcomes. The next piece is infrastructure, and infrastructure is really critical. Micromobility users are some of the most vulnerable road users, and if they don't feel safe, and they don't have that kind of continuous network that they can use and they can trust, then quite simply a micromobility scheme will fail. It won't even get off the ground. I wouldn't invest in it. I wouldn't invest in it if you don't have the infrastructure. Invest in the infrastructure first. So in terms of infrastructure, we're talking most critically about dedicated cycle lanes, but we're also talking about parking and increasingly charging infrastructure as well. So cities that have adopted systems with more formalized forms of parking have been shown to sort of be able to grow and expand micromobility beyond dockless, what can be achieved in a dockless system, where often the challenges of dockless kind of then provide a constraint on growth. We also need sort of even road surfaces. That's really important. And geofencing there I've put on the slide is a digital rather than a physical form of infrastructure that can be used to control, for example, the boundaries of an operating area of a scheme, but also enforce against kind of a no-go or go slow areas as well. And indeed parking where you can and can't park. So geofencing is becoming an increasingly important part of the overall sort of infrastructure architecture of micromobility schemes. And this slide just reflects it's an example of a parking bay, it's a parking bay or a virtual docking station, depending on how you want to describe it, in the London Borough of Camden in London. So this is one of a network of over 200 bays in this particular London borough. The bays are found on average at 250 metre distance. That's the sort of network density. It's up to 50 metres in more densely populated areas, and it reduces to maybe 400 or 500 meters in less populated areas. And 70% of parking bays are located on the road as well, which is important in the context of protecting and preserving sidewalk space for pedestrians as well. So this is an example of kind of best practice really in micromobility parking bay design. So the next item is regulation. Regulation is a powerful tool to ensure that the scheme is aligned with objectives. However, over-regulation or improper regulation is one of the quickest ways to kill a scheme. So this slide identifies various items that can benefit from regulation. I've described it here as regulation being high impact but low consequence. You don't really want regulation to undermine the viability of the scheme from an economic or commercial perspective, because often these are quite marginal schemes to operate in any case. But we've got some examples here. So vehicle specifications, speed, fleet size. So you can impose a cap on the number of vehicles, for example, and scale it over time. Operating areas, number of operators, how much competition you've got, crucially, parking price, and then also thinking about requirements for accessibility, environmental standards and performance, and also sort of stakeholder engagement, particularly in terms of how you educate users and riders on how to behave appropriately and how to use the scheme appropriately, where to ride, where not to ride, where to park, etc. So all of these can be regulated, and there are doubtless other items that can be regulated as well, but it needs to be effective regulation and have due consideration for the requirements of operators, requirements of the user, non-user, as well as the sort of public authority, the city government as well. Sometimes there's a tendency for city government to maybe think only about what they want to get out of the scheme and preserve the interest of non-users as well. But there's lots of stakeholders here that you need to balance when you think about regulation. So the next one is operations, and operations, of course, consider how a scheme will work in practice. I've tried to define some sort of key questions that you might ask from an operational perspective when designing a scheme. So with thinking, for example, in terms of what does the operating area look like? Will there be kind of exclusion or no-go zones? Will there be policies, such as go slow zones in certain areas. Parking is increasingly critical. So where can users park? Where can they not park? How is parking then enforced? Is it mandatory, so you can only park in specific areas, and you won't physically be able to lock your vehicle if you don't park there? Or will it be advisory, in which case you might encounter a small surcharge for parking outside of a designated area? Or will it be totally unregulated and completely kind of dockless and free floating? And then by extension, how will good parking behavior be encouraged? Thinking about batteries and charging, I touched on that on deployment models a little bit earlier. How will that work? How will vehicles be redistributed around an operating area? So often you get, particularly with commuting trips, you get flows in certain directions, and then you need to kind of move and redistribute vehicles to maximize demand. There may also be requirements through procurement to ensure that certain areas are serviced, maybe areas of lower public transport accessibility, or areas of maybe greater deprivation, because there's just a social desire to service certain areas more intensively than others. Also thinking in terms of sort of vehicle maintenance and upkeep, thinking more broadly about compliance and enforcement as well, and how will the scheme work in practice? So it's those are some questions. There are many more, but it's some sort of a start of the 10 if you're designing a micromobility scheme. It's probably worth noting that there are various interventions that can help with operations, and these have somewhat grown organically through learnings of past schemes. One such is the use of number plates or vehicle registration marks on e-scooters. These can help identify users who have maybe not using the vehicle correctly, or haven't parked in the right place, or so on and so forth, and these can then be used as a sort of a compliance tool, but whilst also, of course, helping the public authority sort of track scooters and the operation of the scheme more broadly. So this is one such technological innovation that's come through to help e-scooters and help deliver a kind of a successful and effective scheme. If we think about safety, so safety needs to be considered in terms of both users and non-users. Often there's not enough emphasis put on the non-user. Again, infrastructure, as I touched on earlier, is really key to ensuring the safety of riders on roads and also at junctions. But non-users, older people and people with disabilities, they're pulled on the screen. Actually, these vehicles are parked quite appropriately, but they can still be a trip hazard to this cane user. You can imagine if these vehicles were sort of scattered all over the sidewalk, and they'd be even more so. So it's really important to consult with these groups when you're designing a scheme. Bike clutter and scooter clutter has been a real challenge of the dockless model, and it's a reason why the dockless model is maybe now reverting to more of a hybrid model as best practice kind of continues to develop and emerge. Of course, wheelchair users might also struggle to sort of get past vehicles that are strewn on sidewalks as well. So it's a complex mix, but a good sort of combination of planning, of user education, and probably also a little bit of technology as well can help to promote a safe scheme. So we're thinking about the environmental footprint of micromobility, and as I highlighted earlier on, the dockless model presents some particular challenges. I'd say it's really important to embed environment and sustainability considerations into the scheme from the outset. And procurement is kind of a really important tool to do that. Operators actually are increasingly alive to the issue of environmental sustainability. Originally, when particularly shared e-scooter schemes were launched, operators to say, hey, look, our transport it's zero emission, it's zero carbon, and that's true at the point of use when the user's sort of riding along, but it's very much not true of sort of the supply chain and life cycle of the e-scooter. Batteries may, when they first came to market, a battery might last a year and then it's discarded and disposed of, and probably not in the most appropriate way either. So there has historically been quite a large environmental footprint to electric micromobility, but operators are really working hard to change that. They understand that's something that's ultimately a risk to their business if they're not environmentally sustainable, and it's a point at which they compete with one another in terms of their own business models as well. So yeah, as I said, procurement is really important. But yeah, it is battery production and disposal that's key, and it's also maintenance. And so this photo here, it shows a non-electric van that's collecting scooters, and it's then taking them off to a depot to be serviced, to be fixed or charged or whatever it might be, and then they'll no doubt come back again. And so there's a sort of a footprint there, quite a significant footprint there. And if that's happening at scale across a city, and there might be regulations through the scheme as well, which quite often it's, if a vehicle is not parked in the right place, the operator will have 2 hours, let's say, to get it back in the right place. So you can imagine at that point they're dispatching one of these vans out somewhere to collect one scooter that's not where it should be, or one bike that's not where it should be, and they're then putting it back in the right place just to be compliant with the scheme. So there needs to be an understanding as well from public authorities as to what works, what works in the interest of everybody, the environment included. In terms of commercial viability, a micromobility scheme may be run profitably, or it may be run with subsidy, and subsidy may still be needed to encourage an operator to play, even if a scheme is otherwise or would otherwise be profitable. So it's important to consider that micromobility companies, they have a fleet of vehicles that they can deploy globally. So these vehicles are a scarce resource. So if you for example have a choice of servicing I don't know, a Jakarta or a Manila, and in Jakarta you can achieve a margin of 2%, and in Manila a 5% margin, then the operator would probably choose to deploy in Manila rather than Jakarta, or might move some of their vehicles from one market to the other. So it's important to agree financial targets at the outset, and it might be that a scheme is forecast to make a loss, and the public city authority needs to make up the shortfall for the operator, or it might need that they need to sort of almost top up the operator's profit margin as well. That's not unheard of. If a particular city really wants a scheme, then that could be a way of delivering it. But commercial viability is subject to a range of factors. I won't go into them. They're described in sort of bullets on this slide, and it's complex. It's a complex web of factors, and it also impacts quite significantly on things like infrastructure and regulation as well, and that interplay between all of those elements described earlier on. But an operator will need, I think, importantly, a clear understanding of all of these sort of parameters, if you like, of a scheme before they commit to deploying. So they have confidence in their own financial performance and the economic viability of the scheme. Viability is ultimately, it requires sort of a partnership approach to be struck between operators and city authorities. It's not always been that way historically, but it's increasingly becoming so. One that's based on trust and transparency, sort of open data sharing protocols, etc. So financing, I'm aware that we obviously have quite a financial audience here today. It might be interesting to note that many micromobility companies struggle to achieve profitability, and only do so once they have achieved economies of scale, or they operate maybe in a very particular niche. and it's often a long road to profitability. So shared micromobility companies have typically relied on venture capital at the startup phase, certainly the larger ones. Smaller firms might have relied a bit more on crowdfunding, but venture capital is really the key financing tool. Private equity, of course, could be involved as well. And then once they're transitioning from startup to sort of growth phase, we've seen some go live on the stock market with IPOs with varying successes. Some have been delisted since. And then once you get into the operations of a scheme, you might be securing funding from government subsidies or from sponsorships as well. But important to note that profits and reserves are really only funding a small part of a micromobility company's growth, and usually not for quite a long time into their development. So this also highlights why imposing kind of onerous regulation might actually be quite challenging to the overall business model, and you might see that you're getting lots of market entrants and exits, and there's lots of consolidation in the market at the moment as well, which is driven by the sort of challenging margins that exist within it. And then just the final point of the framework was public perception. So public perception is, first of all, it's crucial to enabling growth or expansion of a scheme. If the public don't like it, politicians probably won't either. There's sort of a convenient feedback loop that goes on there, and it's important to bear in mind that there will be more non-users than there will be users. So how a scheme is perceived by non-users is therefore critical, and many dockless schemes struggle to grow because issues such as bike clutter became more pronounced where there were more vehicles involved, which kind of imposes a bit of a ceiling on growth. And then most large scale systems have or are moving sort of away from the dockless model, more towards sort of sometimes docked, but increasingly hybrid model. So how your scheme is perceived is really important to its success. And then just a summary, a final slide on key takeaways. So I will shamelessly read these to you, but I think there's value in doing so. So micromobility is a highly fluid market segment and can be difficult to define. So new vehicles have been created all of the time. E-scooters are only created sort of as a shared electrification mode in 2017. Who knows where we'll be at in 5 years' time? We might have an e-scooter with seats or a bike with no seats. So the market is dynamic, and electrification can help to accelerate the adoption for reasons described before. Micromobility must be given a clear role in the transport system, and without kind of high quality infrastructure, the scheme will fail. So if you don't have that infrastructure in place, get that in place first would be my advice. But importantly, again, linked to that, micromobility can also strengthen the business case for cycling infrastructure. So if you've got 100,000 cyclists in a city, and then you've got 100,000 e-scooter users, you've then got 200,000 people who are using the infrastructure. So it's micromobility is an ally of other modes as well. So if not planned and regulated properly, micromobility schemes can have unintended consequences. So this relates to how the objectives that you give it. You give micromobility and how you sort of fit it in with the wider transport system, how it maybe complements other forms of active travel and public transport, and hopefully tries to achieve a mode shift away from private vehicle use. And then commercial viability is really critical, but it's complex, and it will differ from place to place as well. So it's always value, I should say, in doing some engagement with operators, some soft market testing type activities to really understand how operators perceive a market, a particular city, a particular place that they might be being invited to operate in. And then finally, few micromobility companies are profitable. And that may change with consolidation. We see lots of sort of very small companies that operate in small towns that are just purely driven by venture capital, and you look at them and you think, oh, gosh, how are they going to survive, and what's their sort of long-term trajectory? And then you get the big almost like sort of global companies, the likes of Lime, the likes of Bird, Neuron Mobility in Singapore, for example, who are kind of now achieving scale, and profitability comes with scale as well. So that's all I have for you today. That's my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to receiving some questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's been a really interesting presentation. Micromobility, we are seeing micromobility in the sense like e-scooters. We're seeing influx of e-scooters in a number of global cities, and without the proper regulation and enforcement, it can be quite disruptive. I'll let people to add any question to our Q&A box if they have any. And in the interest of time as well, I have just one quick question to ask you, Tom. It's the prospect of e-scooters in the Asian cities. We know Europe, they have, a number of European cities, we have seen micromobility being introduced. In your opinion, what do you see the prospect in any of those Asian cities?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and that no one can deny that micromobility has seen greater adoption in Europe and North America than Asia. I think the key, it really comes down to infrastructure actually, and how safe people feel to use these vehicles. If you've got a city that's got a sort of strong cycling profile, then there's a good chance that people will be interested to use shared micromobility as well. There is also probably an income element to it. So I think slightly higher income micromobility per unit distance traveled isn't always the cheapest form of transport. So it then tends to lend slightly better to slightly higher income areas of cities if you're looking to sort of roll it out. But I've seen plenty of examples. It's interesting actually in traveling around, being different parts of Asia. You often see scooters on the street, but then sometimes there is very few people using them, and the reason is infrastructure, first and foremost. And then once you've got that sorted, you can then begin to maybe work through some elements of that framework to really get a scheme optimized. But I think it will change. I expect it will change as we see cycling infrastructure in particular takes a more prominent role in Asian cities. I think it's an opportunity for shared micromobility to sort of jump on the back of some of that as we sort of transform what we think of our ideas of sort of what a good place looks like, and that balance between maybe place and movement functions. And car dominance is the principal challenge really to micromobility adoption.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Again, in the interest of time, I think we can wrap up this session, but if you have any question, comments for this presentation, please by all means get in touch with Tom and us. We will respond to your queries. So thank you everyone for taking the time to join us. Special thanks to Tom for this fantastic presentation. We will share the recording of this presentation as soon as possible, and we'll really hope to see you in the next webinar, which Pam mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. It's about accelerating adoption of e-mobility in Malaysia, and will be presented by our colleague Noor Zurianizaki, and that will be on the 14th, the same time, 3 p.m. Manila time. So until then, thank you so much, and we look forward to see you again in the next webinar. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.